This is The Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. We have a great guest today. Dr. Scott Lisea, the campus pastor at Westmont College, is with us. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll love it. The Good Life is next. This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us. I have Dr. Scott Lisea here with me today. Scott, welcome.
Hey, thanks. Good to see you again.
Scott's a friend and is the campus pastor at Westmont, in addition to being the assistant to the president for community and church relations.
You got it.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, we tried to get a longer title. Yeah.
Well,
Cards are too short.
right. Well, that's yeah. I can't believe I got that right. Let's tell me a little bit about just kind of your upbringing and where you were born, raised, your neighborhood, your parents.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I was raised by wolves out in the wild. Yeah. That's no one's surprised by that.
Right.
Actually raised most my whole life up in Santa Cruz. My folks split when I was about 4. And so my mom moved my sister and I to Santa Cruz with her. And so full on grew up in Santa Cruz in the 70s, and it was everything you might imagine.
Expect.
I still remember my mom throwing an actual legit toga party, and
Really?
we rented out our garage to some surfboard shapers, so I can still get nostalgic at the smell of fiberglass, and I think maybe did some damage to my brain, sure. But yeah, so grew up with a single mom for some years, and then she remarried to my stepdad, and lots of freedom and no discipline growing up in Santa Cruz.
Huh.
Yeah.
And well, how did your relationship with your dad change after the split, or what do you remember?
Yeah.
Or how did that impact your life?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, there's about a year of my life I have no memories of from that traumatic,
Oh, really?
4 years old, yeah. Apparently lived with my aunt for a while, and then there'd be years at a time without my dad in the picture at all, largely due to alcoholism. But then some fun summer months where I'd go and spend the summer with him wherever he was, and those were great. But I think that had a pretty big impact on what I'd end up doing with the rest of my life. Which was kind of having a heart.
Talk about that.
Having a heart for the fatherless a lot of times.
Yeah. Wow. Talk about meeting the Lord. I know there's a story about a donut shop. I've never heard you tell it, but I'd love to hear you tell it.
Well, I was 15 and a half, and somehow it dawned on me that I did not know who God was. And I thought, I think you're supposed to know this. And so I asked everybody I knew. I asked my parents. I kind of grew up in this hippy-dippy kind of Eastern religion, kind of Santa Cruz, everything goes thing. I drove a Jewish friend to school each day. I worked at a pizza place with a Mormon girl. I just asked everybody I knew what they thought. And at the end of it, I was like, I have not heard anything that feels like truth. It sounds like legit. I can't believe any of that. And so I'd made a career change from the pizza joint now to Winchell's Donuts on 41st Avenue in Capitola. And I was making donuts one night, and they weren't coming out good, and that was sort of the straw. And so I threw the donut sticks against the wall and said, God, that's it. If you're out there, you come get me. I'm done trying to find you.
Really?
And the next day, I'm not even kidding, the next day I had a new boss at work, and she starts telling me about Jesus. And she didn't do it very well, semi-offensive, but I knew she was saying stuff that just felt like truth. And so I was having a physical reaction to the gospel where I couldn't stop smiling. So I'm covering my mouth the whole time.
Really?
And asking her follow-up questions. And I took another probably 6 months of reading the Bible for the first time. I'd get off work at 11:30 at night and go knock on her door and ask her more questions. And
Really?
Finally on August 8th, 1982, I knew I was just being stubborn at that point. And I was again alone at work, the donut shop, got down on my knees and on the tile and said, Jesus, I want you. I want it all. I want to follow you. Here's everything. And it wasn't emotional at all, but it was it was very sincere.
That was the moment.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Wow. And you smile a lot still.
I think the Holy Spirit stuck it on smile. Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. I was one of my mentors one time said, Dean, smile and make them wonder what you're up to. I think we need to smile.
I've had a lot of people ask that about me. What am I
Why
up
you
to?
smile? Oh,
No,
really?
yeah, wondering what I'm up to.
Yeah, right, yeah, exactly. That's good. And then from there, when did you meet your wife?
Oh well, so we grew up, pretty poor, and no discipline in the house whatsoever. So right around the time I'm meeting Christ, I decide I wonder what discipline's like. So I become a Navy Sea cadet and join the wrestling team, and I figure my ticket out is I'm going to go to Annapolis, and so I'm getting ready to do that. Then I give my life to the Lord, join Young Life, join this great church, and my Young Life leader and my youth pastor both went to Westmont College, and my Young Life leader says, you ought to go check out Westmont. And so I came down on one of these weekends with another buddy and checked it out, and just shy of an audible voice, the Lord was like, I have a different plan for you. And so came to Westmont, and during that first week of orientation, I was in this leadership program. I was walking down to the first meeting of the year of this leadership program, and met Jamie McEwen in the lobby of Page Hall, and said, anybody else going to this meeting? And this beautiful girl in tight jeans and a red sweater said, I am. And I said, thank you, Jesus. And that was it. We got lost on our way to Dean Chapel, and that
which is hard to do.
The hunt was on. Yeah.
Wow. And so you've been married
30 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
Tell us about your kids.
I got 3 sons, and my sister's boy, my nephew, who we've helped raise as well. So a lot of men.
Yeah.
I was changing the painting over the mantle the other night, and noticed that there's blood on the wall. And I thought, good Lord, what are these guys doing when I'm not here? But so my nephew is Brandon, and he's got his first son, Dylan Scott Lisea. And my oldest boy, Tyler, is married to Brittany, and he's in town here and looking at going to law school next year. Reed is here living with us, graduated from APU with a film degree. And Braden's our youngest. He's a junior at Westmont.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was reading, kind of tracking your career. You were a Young Life leader here, area director, and then went on to Oaks Christian and came back to Providence and now Westmont. Yeah. But talk about the Young Life years and talk about there's a special needs component to that called Capernaum that I'd love you to talk about how that all happened.
Yeah. So when I graduated Westmont, I actually went down to Escondido, North San Diego County for 10 years and became the area director of North San Diego County, and was coaching football and working with kids on the Native American reservation down there, and kids in this great blue collar town, and a lot of Latino kids and every kind of kid. It was great years. And during those years, we kept going to summer camp and meeting up at the same time as this area from San Jose that had these kids with disabilities. And pretty soon, I would start to call my buddy Nick up there and coordinate when he was going to camp so that I could bring my football players at the same time, because it was transformative for them to watch these kids go through camp and be a part of helping them get through the ropes course or whatever. And somehow the kingdom was explained to them in ways, and that I think they saw it in different ways just being around them. So I think the Lord always had that on my heart. And then after 10 years there, came to Santa Barbara to be the regional director for Central California. And in the first year, I just kind of had a wild experience from the Lord, frankly, that kind of led to starting the club here within the first year or two.
What happened?
It goes back to while dating Jamie at Westmont, we go to a movie at Victoria Theater. It's the Mother Teresa documentary. Romantic date, for sure. And there's this scene in there where she's going bed to bed in this refugee camp, picking up these kids, all sorts of deformities, and she's just rubbing them and holding them and squeezing them and kind of telling them they're beautiful. So I had that scene in my mind. Fast forward years and years later, I have this dream, and in the dream, it's like a point of view. I'm Mother Teresa going bed to bed and hugging kids and telling them they're children of God and they're beloved, and that was a neat dream. Well, then as a regional director, I take a couple of friends to India, a couple of guys, supporters, and we go and we're doing Young Life stuff there, training Young Life leaders, and then we go into a Mother Teresa home, and we walk into this room. This nun's going to give us a tour. We walk into this room, the nun disappears, there's no tour, there's just the scene out of my dream.
Really?
It is wall-to-wall cribs and beds with children with all sorts of things we don't see here. and you could hear the air leave our lungs. Our wives are not with us. I got 4 men. And in a second, I was like, guys, here's what we're doing. We're going to go bed to bed, crib to crib. We're going to pick up these kids. We're going to squeeze them, love them, bless them, tell them who they are. And I can't remember if that was an hour, if that was 2 hours, if that was 10. I don't know. It was just this moment in all of our lives. Came home, was like, that's it. Found a Westmont grad that wanted to go to San Francisco and work with inner city kids. And I said, how about if you stay here and help us start a ministry with kids with disabilities? And she said, she was courageous and said yes. We didn't know any kids. I went to Santa Barbara High, where I was coaching football at the time, and found out we had a classroom there with kids with disabilities, and met Robie and started picking up Robie and taking him out to lunch, and that's a whole nother story.
Where's Robie now?
He lives in town. He works at Kyle's Kitchen.
Oh, he does?
Yeah. But Robie is great. I pick him up to go to lunch, and we'd cruise Milpas, and he'd hang his head out the window, and at all the girls, he'd scream, woo, woo, and all the guys, he'd scream out, dork. And I thought, Robie, you're going to get us killed, man. And then we'd eat burgers, and then I'd take him back to the school. We'd play wiffle ball for a little bit, and I'd get him back to his classroom. And I remember at one point doing this, and I was real busy and feeling very self-important as a regional director. And I was thinking, God, is this a waste of my time? Like, is anything getting through in this moment? And I just felt in the spirit a 2x4 across the head that says, don't you worry about me communicating myself. Pay attention. And that led to about millions and millions of lessons that I've actually learned from these kids with disabilities. Yeah, it's changed my life.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
it is. I was talking to somebody else about this, but we have a special needs daughter, and you know, it's a perspective changer, you know, and I think the gift of perspective is something, and what we can learn is incredible. The simplicity, the purity, there's so much there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. Sometimes it's subtle things. I'm driving down State Street one time and look over at the bus stop, and there's 5 of our students, and so I pull over and say, what are you guys doing? And Jessica hollers out, you know, Nick's got a doctor's appointment. And I'm thinking, okay. She said, we're going with him. And I'm just hit with this fact where I go,
I love it.
Do I go to doctor's appointments with my friends because they might be nervous? I mean, is, you know, profound. And
that is so
two
beautiful.
Other things. I was speaking at a camp. Young Life now does some of these weeks where it's just with students with disabilities, and get sort of tailored the program to slow some things down and make it fit. And one time I'm speaking at camp, and there's a young lady there with pretty profound form of autism and no eye contact, nonverbal, lots of tics. And I'm greeting her each time, hi Corin, you know, how are you? But nothing coming back. And again, tempted to have that feeling, like, is anything getting through? 3 or 4 days into camp, Corin and her aide are walking toward me, and the aide says, Corin would like to talk to you. And I said, what? And she had this machine that she could type into. So she had already typed out a message to me with one finger, and she hit play. And out came the most beautiful, impactful encouragement I think I've ever received. She was blessing me in the work we were doing, and so that started a friendship. I got to see Corin about 3 summers in a row, and lots of Facebook messages in between, and got to know more of her story. And she's an amazing woman. I asked her at one point, I said, Corin, have you always known God? And she goes, oh, I've always known God. I didn't know his name was Jesus till I was about 5, and he told me. But he tells me every day that I'm his beloved daughter. I'm like, I think I have some things to learn from Corin.
Yeah, I was going to say, who's the special needs again?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, we've been so impacted by our experience, so Capernaum it meets every other week. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the world now. My buddy Nick Palermo up in San Jose is the guy that started it, and it's just exploded in the mission of Young Life. And And in Santa Barbara, it meets about every other week. Usually in my garage, we turned into a club room because I can hit the garage door rolls up and chairs roll in, and
Right.
we have a great time in there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Your journey with Young Life and Oaks Christian and Providence, what stood out about that journey in each place, or what's something you've taken along the road here?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't smart enough to plan any of it. I felt very led each step of the way, mostly in hindsight. I think my those first 10 years was all about just doing the work, beautiful work of giving yourself to kids' lives and investing in other people that were doing it, and building teams that kind of mission communities, people that were doing something, and it wasn't just constipated with Bible study. We were actually doing mission together.
Yeah.
And that group of people tended to stay because it was so life-giving.
Right.
That taught me a lot. So then when we came up here as regional directors, Jamie and I had a real passion to train people to build teams that would do that. And so that led to a lot of training. We led this thing called The Experience for about 15 years, and that sent hundreds of people into leadership, and that was really rewarding.
Wow.
Somewhere through the end of that, I started studying again and was getting my doctorate at Fuller, and this opportunity at Oaks Christian came across my windshield. 3 different people sent it to me within about a week, and I had this experience of saying, wow, I think I'm supposed to go do this, and went through quite a rigorous interview process to get that role. But it was a joy for me again to be in a community where I was going to see people a couple days, day after day, not just once in a while,
Right.
and be in students' lives and with faculty and administrators.
Yeah.
I accidentally ended up as the head of school. That led to an offer to come to be the head of school here at Providence in town. They had just merged a couple of schools and wanted their first head. So I had the privilege of doing that for a few years. And then this opportunity at Westmont came up. And for me, again, I can do a lot of different things, but I really wanted to invest in students and send the next wave of leaders. That's kind of becoming very clear to me that's what makes me tick. So
Yeah. Sending leaders.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what's your vision? I mean, in terms of your role with, I know that you have a role with Westmont community as a whole, but specifically the students.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you want to see, or what's your dream, your vision for what can happen while they're up there before they're sent out?
Well, so much. I know you had a great experience. I had a phenomenal experience up there as a student, and I tasted what a Christian community looked like, and not a romantic one, like a real one.
Right.
I have lifetime friends, brothers that I still walk with to this day. I was exposed to mission opportunities, ministry opportunities there, and put in places of leadership that I wasn't ready for yet. And that's kind of how Jesus did it with his guys. It's like, you guys don't know Jack, go out and do a mission and come back and tell me about it,
Right. Ready, fire, aim.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think all that stuff that I experienced, I want to be a part of that here. So it's a privilege. I get to do pastoral counseling and come alongside students and cheer them on. But I also want to launch them, that they leave this place as real Jesus people, that they be really clear about him and the Gospels, and go and lead teams of people into Jesus kind of stuff wherever they are.
Yeah. Do you like to preach?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Yeah.
What has been this year, what has been your theme, or what are some things you've been talking about?
Well, it's the first time I've ever done it like this since in having this gig, where I think, oh wow, okay, I've got a series of 18 if I want to do a series. So last year I did a whole series on Psalm 23. I stretched 6 verses into about 18 messages. That's and this year, but that came out of a place where it's like I was aware that students deal with so much anxiety and depression. I really wanted them to be able to say with David, "The Lord is my shepherd; I lack nothing."
Yeah.
So we did that. This year, really on my heart is this John 17. I'm calling it the Lord's Prayer for his beloved community. And just looking at what does Jesus want for his community, and so much in there. And the thing that keeps resonating is this idea of oneness, and that's where I go. The Christian community is a wild deal. A bunch of people that don't belong in the same room are family, and it's messy, and complicated, but
Right.
somehow his vision. And so I just want us to lean hard into figuring that out.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, or growing in it anyway.
And how did, that leads me to another question, but I want to insert another one. In our world right now, of this divided, angry scene that we're in,
I hadn't noticed. What are you talking about?
you did watch the news? It just seems like that, I guess Jesus may have had it right in terms of if you want them to know that you're my disciples by your love for one another. Because it seems like in this day and age, the contrast between that and what we've got is pretty stark.
It's very stark. Yeah, the world is moving into a place, or at least our culture is moving to a place where it's almost as unity only in agreement.
Right.
And actually, that's not the Christian view of unity whatsoever. It's this idea of oneness. In the Hebrew, it's this word echad, which is like a symphony or a choir or a team. Many parts can come as one.
Yeah.
They don't diminish themselves. They don't melt. But they create something new in their oneness, right? And I think only Jesus people have access to this in a way that our culture does not. And we need to lean hard and, like you said, in love. It's not that the world's going to know you're my disciples by your T-shirts or even by your politics or by your ideologies.
Right.
But how about the ability to love an enemy? That's this profound Jesus idea. We ought to try it out.
Right. I read the other day, I knew love your enemy was in there, but I didn't know it says, and if your enemy asks you for money, give it to him and don't expect it back. Right.
Yeah, if you ask for your shirt, give him your coat. Say thank you very much. Because what would that do?
What would that do?
What would that do? If someone comes to throw a blow at you, you absorb it.
Right.
What does that do?
Yeah, we need this, don't we?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
That's where one of my big hearts at Westmont in this role is I want our students to recapture Jesus as teacher. Not just as Lord, not like we just needed him for the last 6 hours of his life, but actually as teacher for life.
Right.
This is how life in the kingdom goes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you before that about millennials.
Yeah.
So millennials are, I don't know what the age that means, but I've heard the term, a lot of jokes, a lot of parodies, Facebook. You've worked with young people for quite a while.
Yeah.
What would you say in terms of what you've learned about young people today, the good things, the challenges, the technology, the social media, what's God's, for example, I was thinking about this the other day, what's God's highest and best use for social media? But could you comment on just, 'cause since you've spent so much time in that world?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I learned after working with young people for 30 years is if you want to stay young, work with young people. If you want to die young, try to keep up with them. So I've blown out my knee, broken my ankle. This is a fake tooth, but whatever. I am not just being nice. I continue to learn a lot from being with young people. And yes, there are things that every generation has to, the demons or principalities and powers that they have to wrestle. We had them.
Right.
They have them. Right. And it's somehow we have perfect 2020 vision on theirs and not so much ours, right?
Right.
And we forget the fact that, by the way, we raised this generation. But that aside,
setting that aside,
put them in helmets after they came out of the womb. But so there are things that I'm really excited about, and a sense of mission that's holistic, a desire for authentic, not enraptured with glossy, but looking for real.
Right.
And that makes sense, right? They've seen everything fail. Banks, presidents, politicians, pastors, preachers, teachers, the church, whatever. They've seen it all fail. So I think, this idea of looking for real, it makes sense.
Yeah, we're not wearing makeup, by the way.
No, we're not.
Right, we're keeping it
actually,
real.
I'm an albino. But there's also, I think, we see this huge spike in anxiety and depression the year that smartphones became predominant. And that's obviously connected. There's lots of other things, but this fear of missing out, this bullying, this constant sense of measuring your value by how many people are paying attention to this faux life that you're presenting.
Right.
That's a tough go.
Right.
I even think of being, in a conversation like this, where we both probably have smartphones in our pockets, and if one buzzes, then that means something else is going on. You and I didn't grow up with that.
Right.
It's a tough way to, it's
Right.
literally changing attention spans,
Right.
abilities to sit and read for long periods of time.
Right.
I think we'll see a corrective. I think we're already seeing some of it. People sort of, making Luddite vows to, get rid of some stuff.
Right.
But I think that's a distinct thing they're wrestling with.
Right. And they're craving authentic.
An actual real connection, not
Yeah.
the fake social connection.
Right.
But don't always know how to get there. I've had some conversations with college students, sincere, looking me in the eyes, saying, "I don't know how to hold a conversation." And
Isn't that something?
makes sense. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like, and I think you make a good point. We talk about, technology, this is all different. There's challenges,
Right.
but every generation has challenges.
Right.
And it's not something to be afraid of. I mean, I think that we need to figure out how to navigate and how to, navigate it.
Yeah.
But there's nothing new under the sun in terms of every generation has their challenges.
Right. And maybe it's the Santa Cruz in me, but I think, question everything. Question, is
Right.
is it a great idea to have this device when you're 11?
Right.
Is this,
Right.
what does this do to my relationships? Everything has a consequence, a lot of them unintended. It's all worth questioning.
Right.
And this is where I think that faith should make us be willing to live counterculturally in some ways. And I'm still trying to figure out what that means with technology.
Yeah. I don't think I've wrapped my mind around it.
Yeah.
I think when I think about technology and social media, I think about I want to be a light.
Yeah.
I want to bless and encourage other people and share good news that hopefully blesses somebody. But I don't want to be fake.
Right.
But I also am not going to put my dirty laundry out there and say, let me tell you about my failing today. It's a
I was
tricky.
thinking about doing a whole year of just me at my worst moments,
Right.
Here's me with the flu, Just to keep it real.
Here's me with the flu. Right. Yeah. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
I mean, the only counsel I've given my kids and thought about for myself is to use it to bless and not curse. Yeah. I haven't seen yet a political fight get solved on Facebook in the messaging.
No, still waiting. Still waiting for that.
I think we're at like 0 for 17 million.
0 for 17 million.
But,
yeah.
So
it does become a great opportunity to talk with young people about, and anybody now, myself included, about being mastered by nothing. What does it mean to have Jesus be your master, but not even the immediacy of needing to respond, and the immediacy of needing to be available all the time.
Right.
That's feeding this sort of false self thing too.
Right.
Like you actually won't die if you don't have your phone on you today. Turns out the universe will
Right.
still spin,
Right.
and you may actually breathe deeper.
Right. I think it can be wrapped up into the identity of busyness,
Right.
importance. If I check my phone and the little red light's on that somebody liked my thing, what does that do for me? It's a weird kind of deal. I don't think we're going to solve this today.
No. In fact, I need to check my post real quick. I sure like it though when I'm searching and studying for a message. I can Google everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We're calling this program "Good Life," not the good life like cars and no sickness, but good life.
Yeah.
Like, what is the good life? Dallas Willard, I think, talks a lot about, what is the good life? That's what everybody's. How would you talk about what the good life, what the good life is truly?
Yeah.
Not this glossy, inauthentic stuff we've been talking about, but talk about that from your perspective and what is the good life?
Yeah. Well, and isn't it great to ask this question in the center of, Santa Barbara, which is a beautiful place, a wealthy place, all this stuff. And, it's very tempting to believe that this right here, right now, is the good life, right? I got to study with Dallas when I was doing my doctoral stuff, and that was one of the great privileges of my life. And kicking this topic around and being shaped by him has been very important in my life. I think of it this way. I think we're disintegrated people. Like what we think doesn't match what our passions are, what our appetites are, what we do and where we go and all this stuff. And I think that the gospel wants to line us up and become integrated people. And I think that the plumb line is the love of God, the love for God, and the love for our neighbor. And so, and you see that in the Shema. It's a very, very old Hebrew idea. You see Jesus reaffirm this in the New Testament. This is the greatest thing. It's the most important thing. Everything else hangs on this. Love God, love your neighbor. So I actually think the good life is when more and more of our parts become lined up and influenced and driven by and infused with the love of God, the love for God, and the love for our neighbor. As that hits my pocketbook, that's the good life. As that hits my time and my availability, that's the good life. As that hits my thoughts, my perceptions of you and my neighbor and people that are nothing like me, that's the good life.
Right.
It's when I'm being I want to write a book called Becoming Love. This idea that that's the good life. And it's interesting that all the mystics get all mystical and they come back to this very central idea. It's about love. It's about the love of God and love for our neighbor.
And that process that you were describing, you're talking about when that comes to my pocketbook, when that comes to my mirror, that's the kingdom coming.
That's it.
Right?
Dallas would say the kingdom of God is the effective rule and reign of God's will. Wherever what God wants done is done. That's the kingdom of God.
Right.
So as the kingdom comes to my appetites and comes to my sexuality and comes to my thoughts, and that's the kingdom.
The rule and reign.
Yeah.
Since we're on Dallas Willard quotes, I always think about when he says, the pervasive joy, this pervasive sense of well-being, that everything is okay.
Yeah.
And he would say, not it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And he even talked about, toward the end of his life, he says, I don't even think I'm really going to notice. Or he says,
I wonder how long it's going to take for me to notice that I'm gone. Isn't that great?
I thought that was I had to
for me about a split second. Yeah.
Right. But he talked about that. He said, I don't even know if it's going to be that big of a shift. And him talking about that pervasive sense of well-being, that everything is okay.
Yeah.
And we live, 98%, and I struggle with it too. We tend to live when this happens, when that happens, if the diagnosis changes, the money changes, the job, then.
Yeah.
But what would it be like to live in the kingdom of God with that pervasive sense of well-being, that where the kingdom has come and everything's okay?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. When we start to define good like God does, like the nearness of God is my good, Psalm 73 says, or even Romans 8:28 and 29, we usually know 28, for those who love God and are called according to his purposes, he causes all things to work together for good. And we stop there. And if you were to ask me, how was your day? Well, I'd say it was good if it was convenient for me, easy, without hassle. Bad if I had hassle, inconvenient. But 29, he says, and this is how I'm going to define good, whoever's gets shaped into the image of Christ. He's always had a predestiny for us to become formed like Christ.
Yeah.
And I think that's being shaped by the love of God and for our neighbor. We see it in him.
Yeah.
And it sounds like good news to me.
It's great news.
Yeah.
It's great news. So whoever's watching out there, this is great news.
It's good news. You should try it on. I'm trying it on.
To wrap it up, in terms of your spiritual pilgrimage, your walk, what does your day look like? What does your morning look like? What disciplines, what routines or not routines, or just tell me. I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Well, when I was studying with Dallas, there's a bunch of pastors he's speaking to. He says, you guys all have a spiritual plan, right? And we all just looked at our shoes. It was just crickets, like, a spiritual plan. Do you know what a spiritual plan is? I don't know. And he talked about, you don't just lapse into faithfulness or be conformed into the image of God, or
by accident,
becoming by love by accident.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of how do you employ these spiritual disciplines to help you become what you are intended to be. And as I get older, the more and more I try to carve out more and more of a morning where there is nobody except Jesus and Jamie and Jamie and I together seeking Jesus, and that has been transformative. So
Yeah.
try to carve out a good chunk of morning of reading and praying,
Yeah.
because I need it. It's
Yeah.
not because I'm holy.
No.
Spiritual disciplines are not about holiness
Right.
as much as they are about wisdom. I need to be remade every day, at least.
Yeah.
There's a great George MacDonald quote: "We who would be born again indeed must be awaken our souls unnumbered times a day." So I set my phone to remind me of the daily office. That doesn't always mean that I then go to the app and read through the office, but sometimes it's just I'm in the middle of a meeting, I see it, and I just try to remember I'm in the Lord's presence. He's totally here and available, and let's go.
Yeah.
So there's that thing. There are some other things I'll set goals or plan for the year at a time. It might
Yeah.
be I try to do a retreat alone at a retreat center in Denver with a spiritual director once a year. It's kind of saved my life the last 4 or 5 summers.
Really?
Yeah, and and different seasons, different disciplines.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I really feel like I can't start my day anymore without some time.
yeah. Yeah.
And if I've got an early thing, then I'm just gotta get up earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like
I'm
I
really
can't-
bad news for the world if I don't. Right, that turns out.
We don't want to turn ourselves loose on the world without
No,
that.
I'm trying to protect y'all.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you.
Great to be with you.
It's great. Thanks. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Awesome. I like your socks, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Did we get those?
You gotta put that in.